In this video, we're going on a virtual city tour of Oslo, the capital city of Norway. Together, we'll explore the history behind over 100 of Oslo's landmarks, monuments and cultural figures who made the city what it is today. So whether you're a tourist, new to the city or a local, I guarantee that, by the end of the video, you'll have a better understanding of Norway's fast-growing capital. The word Oslo comes from two Old Norse words, Ås and Lår. Ås is thought to mean godly or ridge, while Lår means meadow or clearing, so one particularly poetic interpretation of Oslo is Meadow of the Gods. The city's motto, Unanimiter et constanter, is Latin for united and constant. It's featured on the city seal, which depicts Sant Halvard, the patron saint of the city. Since Oslo is the capital, let's speedrun the history of both Oslo and Norway. In 872, according to the sagas, Norway was unified by Harald Hårfagre. During the Viking Age, while the Danish Vikings settled in England, the Norwegian Vikings settled in Scotland, Ireland, Iceland, Greenland, and even Canada. In 1050, Oslo was founded by Harald Hardråde. In 1300, with the construction of Akershus fortress, Håkon V declared Oslo as the capital of Norway. In 1349, a ship from England landed on the shores of Bergen carrying a deadly passenger, the Black Death. An estimated 65% of Norway's population perished, including the rich and the poor, weakening Norway's regional influence. This paved the way for Scandinavia to come under the influence of the Hanseatic League, a union of German merchants and market towns. The impact is so significant that, even today, approximately 30% of the most used words in Norwegian come from Middle Low German, the language of trade at the time. In 1397, the Scandinavian nobility attempted to counter the Hanseatic League with the formation of the Kalmar Union, which consisted of Denmark, Sweden and Norway alongside its colonies, Iceland, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, Orkney and Shetland. In 1523, the Kalmar Union fell apart, and shortly after, in 1537, the Protestant Reformation came to Norway. Norway, still weakened, entered into a union with Denmark. The new country was imaginatively named Denmark-Norway. However, Copenhagen was a seat of power and influence. Being allied with Denmark had repercussions for Norway, as Denmark and Sweden hold the record for most wars fought between two countries. I counted 44 times from the Viking Age to the Napoleonic Wars. In 1624, Oslo burned to the ground. The king, Christian IV, decided to rebuild the city near the coast. A humble man, he named the city after himself, Christiania. In 1803, the Napoleonic Wars began with Denmark-Norway allied with France and Sweden allied with Britain. Britain blockaded Denmark-Norway, with devastating economic effects. In 1814, Sweden invaded Denmark and defeated them. Norway was handed over to Sweden, while Denmark retained Norway's remaining colonies, Iceland, Greenland and the Faroe Islands. Norway, understandably upset, tried to declare independence. A short war ensued, but the Swedes were victorious. During peace negotiations, Norway managed to secure its constitution in return for recognizing the Swedish king. Norway, having some degree of personal freedom, tried to find its cultural identity by looking to its rural life for inspiration. This led to the Romantic nationalism movement, where Norwegian creatives began celebrating their culture through art, music and literature. In 1877, Christiania was renamed Christiania with a K. In 1905, Norway finally became independent, and Christiania was the capital of an independent Norway. In the 1910s, Norway adopted the English Garden City concept, a counter-movement against cramped urban conditions. 12 of them were built around Christiania, and when the city expanded to include its original location, the locals figured it was time to drop the Danish name and revert back to Oslo in 1925. In 1932, the Oslo breakfast was rolled out to Oslo school children for free, consisting of wholemeal bread with margarine, a slice of yellow cheese, half a litre of milk, half an apple or orange, 2 small crackers, and a teaspoon of fish oil during the colder months. If you're unfamiliar with Norway, this is what a typical Norwegian eats for breakfast, and lunch, and an evening snack. In 1940, the Nazis invaded Norway. Of all the countries that eventually succumbed to the Nazis, Norway held out the longest at 2 months. In 1952, Oslo hosted the Winter Olympics. In 1969, no jokes please, Norway discovered oil, changing its fortunes forever and kickstarting a period of immigration. An Iraqi geologist, Farouk al-Qasim, wary of how oil companies exploited nations, envisioned a blueprint for managing the oil where the state had a leading role, instead of just corporations. Today, Norway's oil fund is worth a staggering 18 trillion kroner, which is why Farouk is known as Norges mest lønnsomme innvandrer, Norway's most profitable immigrant. In 1996 and later in 2010, Oslo hosted the Eurovision Song Contest. In the year 2000, Oslo celebrated its 1,000-year anniversary after finding signs of urban settlement that were dated to the year 1000. In recent years, Oslo's history has had some dark moments. In 2001, members of a neo-Nazi group murdered a half-Ghanaian, half-Norwegian teenager. In 2011, a far-right terrorist detonated a car bomb outside the government quarter and followed it up with a mass shooting at a left-wing youth camp, killing 77 people in total. There are two films that depict the attack, 22nd of July, which is in English, and Utøya, July 22nd, which is in Norwegian. In 2022, an Islamic terrorist opened fire during Oslo Pride, injuring 21 and killing 2 people. Despite these incidents, I do want to stress that Oslo is one of the safest cities in the world and certainly safer than my hometown in London. Today, Oslo is the financial and administrative capital of Norway, with a population of 724,000 people. Despite the impression that Norway isn't diverse, 21% of the population have an immigrant background, rising to 35% in Oslo. Oslo consistently ranks amongst the most expensive cities in the world to live in, but also ranks highly in terms of quality of life. The city is growing fast, with buildings constantly under construction or renovation, which is kind of annoying because I constantly have to frame out cranes or covered up buildings. Oslo is the birthplace of several famous people: actors Kristoffer Hivju and Alicia Bø, writer Jo Nesbø, footballer Joshua King, and British-Norwegian journalist Marielle Frostrup. It's also where the music acts a-ha, De Lillos, and M2M were founded. Oslo sits on a fjord and is surrounded by enormous forests, numerous lakes, and hilly terrain. One surprising thing about Oslo is that, from the city centre, you can be in absolute wilderness by travelling for 20 to 25 minutes in most directions. Oslo has a wide array of festivals and events, too many to list here, so keep an eye out on the Visit Oslo website for details. And if anyone from Visit Oslo is watching, I'm available for hire. In June there's Sankthansaften, which you might know by its other name, Midsummer. It isn't a big affair as it is in Sweden, but worth it if you like seeing things burn. In September there's Kulturnatt, when Oslo's museums and galleries open their doors for free. My personal favourite, also in September, is Elvelangs. Oslo's river is lit up at night by thousands of torches, and dozens of artists, dancers and musicians perform along the route. We begin the tour at Oslo S, Norway's largest and busiest train station, with 19 tracks carrying around 100,000 passengers daily. Although it opened in 1987, there has been a railway station here since 1854. A word of advice: don't buy the water or a soft drink in the station. You'll be looking at 59 kroner, including the recycling fee for a 500 ml bottle. The Munch Museum is considered by the locals to be one of Oslo's ugliest buildings. It has 13 floors and 42,000 objects in its collection, including one version of the Scream. It's not openly advertised, but admission is free on most Wednesday evenings as of 2025, so check the website for details. Let's talk about Edvard Munch. His surname originates in Germany and, unsurprisingly, means monk. The Scream is his most famous work. In his diary, he describes the inspiration for the painting. I was walking along the road with 2 friends. The sun was setting. Suddenly, the sky turned blood red. I paused, feeling exhausted, and leaned on the fence. There was blood and tongues of fire above the blue-black fjord and the city. My friends walked on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety. And I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature. Thus, it's thought the figure in the painting isn't the one screaming, it's reacting to the scream. The point portrayed in the painting is nearby in Ekeberg, which will be featured in another video. The scream has influenced pop culture in a myriad of ways. The painting itself is featured in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the book Blade Runner is based on. It inspired the movie poster for Home Alone, the ghost face mask from Scream, and this emoji. Although his father was a doctor, illness was often a part of Munch's life. He was often sick and lost both his sister and mother to tuberculosis. This statue, the mother, commemorates her life. This is She Lies, a sculpture which moves in response to the tide and water. The sculpture is a 3D interpretation of the Sea of Ice, a painting by German artist Caspar David Friedrich. The Opera House, which opened in 2008, is one of Oslo's most visited attractions. The interior consists of over 1,100 rooms, and the futuristic exterior, made from granite and Italian marble, is designed to resemble an iceberg. Head on up the sloped roof to get a free view of Oslo Fjord and the surrounding buildings. I highly recommend taking a moment to enjoy this building, because it really is one of the finest in Norway. I'm not alone in its appreciation, as it makes a brief appearance in the 2020 film Tenet. To the northeast is Barcode, a row of modern high-rise buildings with varying widths which resembles a barcode. I actually like the architecture, but the buildings are somewhat unpopular with the locals. Deichman Bjørvika is Oslo's largest public library, which opened in 2020. It has 6 floors housing over 450,000 books. Inside is Brainstorm, which consists of 400 meters of neon tubes representing the connections between people, thoughts and cultures. The creature from Iddefjord is made from granite from Iddefjord, the same material used by Gustav Vigeland in Vigelandsparken. Vigeland is Norway's most famous sculptor. We'll talk about him later. This fountain is called the Sun and the Earth. Facing the fjord, it symbolizes the emigration of Norwegians to the USA. The Mayflower took 66 days to cross the Atlantic Ocean, but in the 1800s, the advent of the steamship reduced the time to about 1 week. Amidst worsening economic conditions, it's estimated that 800,000 Norwegians, or about a third of the country, left Norway between 1830 and 1920. Indeed, today, there are more Norwegian Americans than ethnic Norwegians in Norway. If you pay attention to their surnames, Norwegian Americans are easy to identify. For example, Lance Henriksen, Kristanna Låken, the Olsen sisters, and Kristin Wiig, whose surname comes from Vik I Sognefjorden. Moreover, Charles M. Schultz's mother had the surname Halvorsen, Chris Pratt's mother was Indal, and Eddie Vedder's father's surname was Seversen. Matt Greining's mother was from Oppland, and Renee Zellweger's was from Akershus. Laura Dern's Norwegian ancestor was from Oslo, Jimmy Fallon's from Fredrikstad, and Paris Hilton's from Ullensaker. For the Canadians, there's Nathan Fillion, Sebastian Bach, and Christopher Heyerdahl, who is related to the explorer Thor Heyerdahl. Jernbanetorget, or Railway Square, is Oslo's transport hub, consisting of a train station, tram station, and bus station. Østbanehallen, or the East Train Hall, was part of the old railway station that was built in 1854. Today it houses a hotel, shopping centre, and the Oslo Visitor Centre. Crush Nazism, unveiled in 2015, depicts Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, smashing a swastika on Norwegian bedrock, a visually striking rejection of fascism. It's dedicated to the Osvald Group, a resistance group that carried out over 100 acts of sabotage, including one at this very station in 1942. However, because of their communist leanings, many of the group were treated as suspects after the war, and the leader, Asbjørn Sunde, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for espionage. One of his quotes is on the side: "It was worth fighting for the freedom, for all nations, for all classes, for all people." Oslo is nicknamed the Tiger City because of a poem by Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson, describing the countryside as a horse and the city of Oslo as a tiger. He's famous for a number of achievements, including writing the lyrics to the national anthem in 1859 and being the first Norwegian Nobel laureate in 1903. In 1869, his friend Peter Kvam came up with the idea of a children's procession to mark Independence Day, in stark contrast to other countries which tend to celebrate the military or royalty. Bjørnson was an enthusiastic supporter of the idea, and in 1870 the first procession went from Akershus fortress to the royal palace. And if that wasn't enough, he also has the distinction of having the most impressive name in Norwegian history, translating to Bearstar Bearson. The 4.5 meter long bronze statue celebrated the city's 1,000-year anniversary. The Ruter Tower is the customer service building for Ruter, Oslo's publicly owned transport company. There are 5 sections, each representing a weekday that progressively light up at night. On Friday evening, all of the sections light up until it resets on the following Monday. By day, this is just an ordinary clock, but at night, this clock lights up in a way that reveals the current astrological sign. Fortuna, daughter of Zeus, is the Roman goddess of luck. She appeared on Oslo's coat of arms from 1632 to 1892. The bazaars are a series of stalls that were originally constructed for the butchers who sold meat at Stortorvet, the nearby public square. Stortorvet, or the Great Square, became Oslo's main city square in 1735, replacing Christiania Torv I Kvadraturen. In 1829, it was the site of Torgslaget, or the Battle of the Square. In 1814, Norway achieved partial independence, but was still ruled by the Swedish king Karl Johan. In his mind, celebrating the 17th of May was a celebration of his Danish predecessor, Christian Fredrik, so he banned it in 1828. The following year, flyers were covertly distributed in the weeks leading up to the National Day, and on the day itself, Norway's first steamship, aptly called Konstitusjonen, or the Constitution, arrived at the port. A student shouted out, "Long live the Constitution," a bit of wordplay that fired the crowd up, who in turn began singing nationalist songs from the aforementioned flyers as they made their way to Stortorvet. The crowd were asked to go home, but they refused, so the Swedish governor called in infantry and cavalry, who subsequently charged at the crowd and beat the demonstrators. Thankfully nobody died, but there were 30 injured, including the student. The Norwegian public were furious that the military was used on civilians, and great anger was directed towards the governor and the king, who had no choice but to lift the ban on the celebration. The student was later questioned by the police and asked his age. He replied, "I am 6 years older than the Norwegian constitution. I hope the gentlemen present remember when that constitution was written." His name was Henrik Wergeland, and he went on to become a writer and folk hero. In 1833, he became the first person to hold an official speech on the 17th of May, Independence Day. His sister, Camilla Collett, was a writer who was regarded as Norway's first feminist. Henrik and Camilla's rebellious nature could perhaps be explained by the Scottish blood on their mother's side. The bybrann, or city fire, is a regular event throughout Norwegian history, and Oslo is no exception. It was devastated by a fire in 1624. The Danish king, Christian IV, decided to rebuild the city near the coast and incorporate Akershus fortress. Upon completion, the new city was renamed Christiania in his honour, although I do suspect he might have been behind the idea. His reign of 59 years and 330 days is the longest in Scandinavian history, during which he founded the cities of Kristiansand, Kongsberg and Røros. He even established a Danish colony in India, parts of which still stand today. This statue, which was unveiled in 1880, was met with significant criticism because of its location and the fact that he was a Danish king. Oslo Cathedral is where the royal family holds their weddings and funerals. It opened in 1697 and has been the subject of numerous restoration works carried out over the years, most recently in 2010. The tower clock is Norway's oldest church clock that is still in use. Outside there are a number of points of interest. The Devil of Oslo is a 90 centimeter tall sculpture that depicts a human being attacked by beasts. It's thought to be a relic from the ruins of St. Halvard's Cathedral in the Old Town, meaning it could be up to 900 years old, making it one of the oldest sculptures in the city. After the far-right terrorist attack in 2011, the people of Oslo left thousands of roses, a symbol of the Labour Party, outside the cathedral. This show of empathy became the inspiration for the Iron Roses, consisting of approximately 1,000 roses arranged in a 5.5 metre wide circle. Blacksmiths from all over the world took part in the project, some of whom personally delivered their roses to Norway. At Bærums Verk, survivors and relatives of the deceased forged their own roses, contributing 81 to the project. This sculpture features part of a quote from Corinthians, and now these three remain: faith, hope and love. But the greatest of these is love. Dolk, meaning dagger, is a Norwegian stencil artist who was inspired by Banksy. Youngstorget is a centre of left-wing power, as it hosts the headquarters for Norway's Labour Party, their youth wing, the Liberal Party and the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions. As such, it's a popular spot for demonstrations, particularly on the 1st of May. It's named after a merchant and later politician named Jørgen Jung, who ironically was one of the city's richest men in 1833. The next area, Kvadraturen, is named after the block style of urban planning. After the devastating city fire of 1624, the streets were widened to 15 metres to hinder future fires. The rich were ordered by the king to build brick houses, although regular people could still use timber. Don't miss the embedded cannonball on Tollbugata from the siege of the city in 1716. Engebret Café is Oslo's oldest continuously operating restaurant, which began in 1857 and moved here in 1862. The building itself dates back to 1760. It's famous for its clientele, which included Ibsen, Grieg, Munch and Bjørnson, who once teased a young and nervous waiter at the cafe by asking him to ask the kitchen, "Si meg, har de hemorrhoider?" Tell me, do you have hemorrhoids? The waiter, unfamiliar with the word, replied, "Et øyeblikk, så skal jeg undersøke." One moment, I will investigate. Naturally, he was met with howls of laughter from the kitchen. Engebret Café is a place where Venstre, the left-wing party, was established, and Crown Princess Mette-Marit worked here as a waitress in the 90s. After Oslo was rebuilt, Christiania Torv was the main public square until it was moved to Sturetorvet in 1736. This fountain symbolizes the moment King Christian IV decided to rebuild Oslo, proclaiming "Her skal byen ligge," the town will lie here. Rådmannsgården is the oldest building in Kvadraturen, dating back to 1626. Rådmann means councillor. The Norwegian word råd has an English cognate, hidden in the name Alfred. The red in Alfred was originally rad in Old English, meaning council. Anatomigården is thought to be the city's oldest half-timbered building. This is a type of construction where the wooden frame is filled with material, but the timber is still left exposed. It hosted a faculty of medicine, hence the name, and was once the lodgings for the executioner, who carried out his grim work in this square. The Gamle Rådhuset, or the Old Town Hall, was built in 1641. Today the ground floor is a restaurant and the first floor is a cultural venue. Akershus fortress dates back to the 1290s and is thought to have been constructed for King Haakon V. The Swedes were somewhat obsessed with the idea of taking the fortress. They attacked it in 1308, 1449, 1523, 1567 and 1716. As previously mentioned, it was under Christian IV's rule that Akershus became an intrinsic part of Christiania. After the union with Sweden in 1814, it became a prison and forced labour camp. The most famous prisoner is perhaps Ole Høyland, who robbed the National Bank in 1835 and managed to escape from prison an astonishing 11 times. During the Second World War, Akershus was occupied by the Germans and used to detain and execute dozens of Norwegian resistance fighters. This was a dark period in Norwegian history, so let's talk about the most hated figure in Norway, Vidkun Quisling, the founder of Norway's fascist party. He attempted a coup during the initial Nazi invasion and thereafter gleefully collaborated with the Nazis. By the end of the war, 50,000 Norwegians were imprisoned and 10,000 were dead, including 765 Norwegian Jews. Furthermore, Norway's GDP declined by 45%. Norway's government had effectively banned the death penalty for civilians in 1905, but used legal kung fu to reintroduce it after the Nazi surrender. Quisling was executed by firing squad here on the 24th of October 1945. He had no children, and his legacy is that his surname became synonymous with traitor in several European languages. The film Quisling, The Final Days portrays his last days. Akershus is also the final resting place for King Haakon VII, Queen Maud, Crown Princess Märtha, and King Olav V. Additionally, the skull of Haakon V, the king who started the construction of the fortress, is kept in the basement. Creepy. George C. Marshall was an American army officer and politician who promoted the idea of sending substantial foreign aid to help rebuild Europe after World War II. It was understood that a poor, war-torn Europe would be more susceptible to the rise of another Hitler or Stalin. So between 1948 and 1952, $13.3 billion of foreign aid in the form of grants and loans was sent to Europe, equivalent to $176 billion in today's money. The Marshall Plan was instrumental in European economic integration, the establishment of NATO, and a new market for American exports. In 1953, Marshall received the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts. This is Peter Wessel Tordenskjold, Norway's real-life answer to Jack Sparrow. I'm not exaggerating, his last name translates to Thunder Shield. And look at that pose. In Norway, he's famous for a particular battle. However, on the internet, he has become famous for his actions off the coast of Lindesnes in 1714. His ship, Løvendal's Galley, was fired upon by the Olbing Galley, which was manned by English and Swedish privateers and, according to some reports, twice his size. After several hours of grueling combat, the Irish captain Bachman of the Olbing Galley had enough and tried to escape during the night, but naturally, Tordenskjold gave chase. They fought on and off, occasionally pausing to repair their ships until the next afternoon. Both ships at this point had taken substantial damage and were running low on ammunition. Tordenskjold didn't want Bachman to know he couldn't continue, so he sent a trumpeter on a small boat asking Bachman if he wanted to have a drink with Tordenskjold. Unbeknownst to Tordenskjold, Bachman was actually ready to surrender. Bachman, presumably confused, refused the offer and sent the musician back, who then relayed how badly damaged the other ship was to Tordenskjold. Tordenskjold then used a megaphone to ask Bachman directly to lend him some gunpowder so they could continue the duel. Bachman refused again, but this time toasted Tordenskjold, who toasted back. Both crews cheered for each other before parting ways. By the way, Tordenskjold was 24 years old at the time and was later court-martialed for his actions. He was acquitted and shortly afterwards promoted to captain. This guy. This bay area is called Pipervika, and if you look carefully along the water's edge, there's a mysterious statue of a 10-centimeter tall bearded merman. The sculptor has chosen to remain anonymous and won't even reveal how long it's been there. We're about halfway through the video now. Have you subscribed? Why not subscribe right now? It'll make my day. Oslo City Hall is the administrative centre for Oslo Municipality and the venue for the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. Although the foundation stone was laid in 1931, it wasn't inaugurated until 1950 as part of the city's 900-year anniversary. A surprising amount of Norwegians don't know it's open to the public, but before we head in, let's look at some of the sculptures around the building. This is Sant Halvard, the patron saint of Oslo. I've told his story before in the Drammen City Guide, so here's a recap. In 1043, Halvard was about to cross Drammensfjord when a pregnant female slave ran up to him and asked to be rowed across. She was pursued by 3 men who accused her of stealing, for which the penalty was death. She strenuously denied the charge and Halvard believed her, so he began rowing her across. One of the men fired arrows towards the boat, one of which struck Halvard, killing him. The men then beat the woman to death and tied a stone to Halvard, attempting to sink his body. After the men left, his body floated back up and the locals buried him. However, miracles were observed at his grave and he became a saint. His memorial day is on May the 15th, the day he died. Sant Halvard is often depicted with a millstone in one hand and 3 arrows in the other, signifying the 3 deaths that occurred. His own, the woman, and her unborn child. Harald Haraldr is the Viking king who ruled Norway from 1046 to 1066. That year should ring a bell for any Brits watching, because this is the king who invaded Anglo-Saxon England and died at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, ending the Viking Age. A few weeks later, the English king Harold Godwinson and his presumably tired army were defeated by William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings, ending the rule of the Anglo-Saxons. One of the things I love about Norway is how it celebrates the working class. Norwegians haven't forgotten how the road to a more equal society, where the working class can live with dignity, was paved with the sacrifices of those who came before them. Here are some figures that illustrate the working life of a cleaner in Norway in comparison to the UK and USA. They earn a living wage, have reasonable working hours, paid overtime, and 25 days paid annual leave in the second year of working. Sick leave and parental leave are both paid at full pay, and there are substantial protections against instant dismissal. Fridtjof Nansen was a Renaissance man with Danish ancestry. He had notable achievements as a polar explorer, zoologist, diplomat, and humanitarian. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1922. In 1886, the artist and writer Christian Krogh released a novel called Albertine, which controversially featured rape and prostitution. It was banned the day after it was released. However, years later, it became the subject of this relief, which features a prostitute, her pimp, and a customer. On a public building of all places. Near the main entrance, there are 16 reliefs depicting scenes from Norse mythology. Outside of Norway, we often associate the Vikings with Norwegian culture, but the Vikings are just a topic Norwegians learn about in school and not a significant part of contemporary culture. In fact, outside of a museum, the only Viking references you'll see are as part of a business name, for example, Viking Auto Repairs or Valhalla Cafe. From 7 AM to midnight, the Eastern Tower will play a piece of music every hour on a carillon, a type of tuned bell instrument. This astronomical clock not only shows the time, it also displays the date, position of the sun, and the moon. This is the room where the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded, so let's talk about how that came about. The Swedish chemist and inventor Alfred Nobel is best known for inventing dynamite. However, despite his explosive professional endeavours, he wanted to reward those who serve humanity, setting aside 94% of his fortune to fund 5 Nobel Prizes, covering peace, chemistry, physics, literature, and physiology or medicine. Additionally, he specified the establishment of a Norwegian Nobel Committee to award the Peace Prize, which is why it takes place in Oslo. The Peace Prize was first awarded in 1901 on December the 10th, the anniversary of Nobel's death. Today, the prize stands at 11 million Swedish krona. If you want to find out more, you can visit the nearby Nobel Peace Centre, designed by British-Ghanaian architect David Adjaye. This is a rather fancy version of the city seal, depicting Sant Halvard and the woman he tried to save. Also featured are Holmenkollen, Akershus fortress, a Viking ship, and the original Sant Halvard's cathedral. This fresco is a montage of nation building, representing some of Norway's industries. The figure on the left is the explorer Fridtjof Nansen, and on the right, Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson. Norwegians, despite being proclaimed as the master race, suffered in the dark shadow of fascism. This frieze shows life under occupation, detailing the systematic methods of oppression and the heroic efforts of the resistance. The final section depicts a free Norway. The council hall features a carving of Sant Halvard between 2 swans, similar to the fountain outside the entrance. On the wall is a tapestry designed by the niece of the architect, which depicts Sant Halvard and the 7 virtues. Before we leave the city hall, I have to add that the toilets are rather immaculate, possibly because they're British. If you only have time for one museum in Oslo, I recommend the National Museum, which with 13,000 square meters of exhibition space is the largest in the Nordic region. They have 400,000 objects, including 1 copy of the Scream. There are 2 interesting sculptures in front of Oslo Concert Hall. Jordmusikk, or Earth Music, is one of my favourite sculptures in Oslo, resembling something from Stranger Things. Nearby is Heptachord, depicting a group of singers, each one representing the 7 notes of a scale. This statue of King Haakon VII, the first king of an independent Norway, was unveiled in 1972 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of his birth, so let's talk about the Norwegian royal family. The Norwegian and British royal families share some similarities. For example, both families are foreign-born. The British royal family has substantial German ancestry, while Haakon was born Prince Carl of Denmark. Later, he married a princess at, dramatic pause, Buckingham Palace. That's right, the first queen of Norway, Maud, was British. But before you get too excited, she was also his first cousin. Upon Norway's independence, a referendum was held on whether Norway should retain the monarchy or become a republic. The public voted to retain the monarchy by a landslide, and the Danish prince became King Haakon VII. All that royal intermarriage meant that the current king of Norway, Harald V, and Queen Elizabeth II were second cousins. Haakon VII's greatest moment came when the Nazis invaded Norway in 1940 and issued the king an ultimatum. end all resistance and designate Vidkun Quisling, the leader of Norway's fascist party, Prime Minister. He consulted the government and refused. In response, the Nazis attempted to assassinate him and the government, bombing the towns they thought they were in. They managed to narrowly escape and eventually left on the HMS Devonshire from Tromsø to London on the 7th of June 1940. These events are depicted in the film Kongens Nei, or The King's Choice, which I highly recommend. The king returned to Norway on the same date 5 years later. This was also the anniversary of when Norway dissolved the union with Sweden, which is why the square is called the 7th of June Square. While Håkon VII and his son Olav V left for London, Olav's wife, Crown Princess Märtha, and the children left for her native Sweden. Her presence in Sweden, being neutral, was problematic. Initially, the border guards refused to let her in until she threatened to drive through the barricade. After she entered Sweden, she was offered sanctuary in the USA by Franklin D. Roosevelt, whom she had visited just prior to the war. In the US, Märtha effectively became Norway's ambassador, working tirelessly to assist exiled Norwegians and receiving state guests. Her friendship with the Roosevelts was such that she and her children celebrated Christmas with them. A fictionalized account of a journey to the US is portrayed in the TV show Atlantic Crossing. The royal palace was completed in 1849 for Karl Johan, who despite the name wasn't Scandinavian or even royalty. He was a French soldier born Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte. After fighting for Napoleon, he was made a prince and through a series of unexpected events was offered succession to the Swedish throne. He was adopted by the Swedish king and changed his name to Karl Johan. In 1812, during the War of the Sixth Coalition, he turned against Napoleon. Denmark-Norway was on the losing side of the war, and as a result, Norway was handed over to Sweden. Understandably, the Norwegians were furious, and in 1814, they tried to declare independence, which in turn triggered a Swedish invasion. Although the Swedes made rapid progress, the Norwegians fought back fiercely, and during negotiations they were offered a deal which crucially included recognition of their constitution. This agreement is known as the Convention of Moss. Karl Johan was a big fan of bollete mushrooms, and to this day, in Sweden, they are called Karl Johans swamp, or Karl Johans mushrooms. So in a way, he is the mushroom king. Back to the palace. Construction took 25 years, so Karl Johan didn't live long enough to live in the palace. Indeed, it was sparsely used until 1905, when Håkon VII and Maud moved in. It was renovated in the 90s, and in 2002, parts of the palace became open to the public during the summer. Today, the palace has 173 rooms spread across 3 floors. The changing of the guard takes place every day at 1:30 p.m, and if you're really lucky, you might catch a glimpse of the royal family. Surrounding the royal palace is Slottsparken, or the Palace Park. The Palace Park has a special place in Norway's history with potatoes, as King Håkon VII requested the park be turned into a potato farm during the First World War to alleviate food shortages. It was a resounding success, resulting in a 450-ton harvest in 1917. Queen Sonja is the current Queen of Norway. At the time, her marriage was controversial because she was a commoner. She is a keen hiker, who even has a hiking trail named after her in Hardanger. In 2017, the DNT gifted this statue to celebrate her 80th birthday. The current Crown Prince of Norway, Håkon, followed his father's footsteps by not only marrying a commoner, but a single mother with a colourful past. It's perhaps for these reasons that the Norwegian public hold their royal family in high regard. This statue commemorates Niels Henrik Abel, considered to be one of Norway's best mathematicians. He was the son of a priest with roots in Germany. He died young, yet his legacy lives on in his work and the Abel Prize, which is akin to the Nobel Prize of Mathematics. On the southwest corner of the Palace Park, you can find the Henrik Ibsens Gate entrance of the National Theatre station. If it's quiet and you fancy a detour, it has a sound sculpture on the ceiling of the ticket hall. Rikard Nordrock was a composer who died when he was just 24 years old. He wrote the music to the national anthem, while his cousin Bjørn Steinar Bjørnson wrote the lyrics. Both are thought to have descended from an ethnic group called Skogfinner, or the Forest Finns. The University of Oslo is Norway's oldest university, founded in 1811. In 2023, it had 26,100 students and 7,200 employees. Notable alumni include the explorers Thor Heyerdahl and Fridtjof Nansen. In Norway, university tuition is free, so it's no surprise that 41.9% of Norwegians have a degree. The National Theatre opened in 1899 with performances by Ludvig Holberg, Bjørn Steinar Bjørnson and Henrik Ibsen. It was designed by Henrik Bull, the son of architect Georg Andreas Bull, who worked on the East Railway Station. The first theatre director was Bjørn Bjørnson, son of Bjørn Steinar Bjørnson, and the first conductor, Johan Halvorsen, married Edvard Griegs niece. Henrik Ibsen is Norway's most famous playwright, and second only to Shakespeare in terms of international importance. His ancestors were Danish and German. Ibsen is the Danish form of Jacobsen. In his early career, he drew inspiration from Norwegian folk tales and wrote one of his most famous works, Peer Gynt, in 1867. The music, composed by Edvard Grieg, featured two pieces of music that entered pop culture, In the Hall of the Mountain King and Morning Mood. If there are any Scots watching, his surname might be familiar. It's because his ancestors came from the MacGregor clan. Later, Ibsen was known for being the father of theatrical realism, which exhibited realistic characters challenging the social norms of the time. His characters were often inspired by members of his family. One of his plays, En Folkefiende, later inspired the writers of Jaws, which was described as a cross between Moby Dick and the Enemy of the People, the English name of the play. Citat Ibsen is an art project which consists of 69 Ibsen quotes embedded in the pavement along Karl Johans gate, illustrating his daily walk from his home to the Grand Café. The project aimed to bring awareness to the fact that many of Ibsen's phrases and expressions entered everyday language, in a manner similar to Shakespeare. This art piece consists of 3 actual French public toilets, representing the French flag and the national motto, liberty, equality, and fraternity. The Norwegian constitution drew influence from the American and French constitutions, hence inside there are speeches played by Franklin D. Roosevelt, Charles de Gaulle, and King Haakon VII. During winter, this area transforms into a Christmas market called Jul i Vinterland. You'd think Norway has a long history of Christmas markets, but the tradition only began in 2005 and Jul i Vinterland began in 2015. In 2019, there were an impressive 2.6 million visitors. Don't let this handsome fella fool you. His name is Gunnar Sønsteby, and he is Norway's most decorated World War II resistance fighter. He trained in Britain for 6 months and worked with the British Special Operation Executive, later becoming the leader of the sabotage unit, the Oslo Gang. I highly recommend the film Number 24, which is based on Sønsteby's life and perfectly captures the paranoia and oppression under the Nazis. Sønsteby is also portrayed in Max Manus, which shows the grand scale of the resistance's operations. The Stortinget building was designed by Swedish architect Emil Victor Langlet. Etymologically, Stortinget means the big thing, which sounds a bit silly but has a rather fascinating history. During the early Germanic period, around 500 BC onwards, the thing was a regular assembly of tribes where they discussed laws, mediated disputes, and even arranged marriages. In later use, thing came to mean the subject being discussed at the thing, and then became a generic term for an object. During Norskkurs, I was lucky enough to go on a tour, so here are some photos. One distinct feature of the debate chamber is that it's located at the front of the building, which in a way makes democracy more transparent. Indeed, Norway's democracy is robust, ranking highly in democracy and press freedom. Parliament is elected every 4 years via proportional representation, with 169 seats up for grabs. The area just outside the building is called Løvebakken, or the Lion Hill, named for the statues guarding the building. They were designed by Christopher Borch, but actually carved by convicts at Akershus fortress. Johan Sverdrup was the 4th Prime Minister of Norway. The Sverdrup family, originally from Denmark, has one more famous member, Otto Sverdrup. He, Fridtjof Nansen, and Roald Amundsen are considered to be the top 3 Norwegian polar explorers. The Grand Hotel, which has 283 rooms, opened in 1874. It traditionally hosts the Nobel Peace Prize banquet after the ceremony at Oslo City Hall. The recipients of the prize get to stay in the hotel and greet a torchlight procession along Karl Johans gate from the balcony. The Grand Café was once frequented by Norway's eminent creative minds, including Munch, Ibsen, and Christian Krogh. This guy, in case you've forgotten. His son, Per Krogh, made a set of murals depicting them all inside. Freia, founded in 1889 and named after the Germanic love goddess, is a beloved chocolate brand that still makes most of their chocolate here in Oslo. I'm personally conflicted, because they have been making uncredited copies of British chocolate for over 100 years. Melkchokolade is based on dairy milk, Kvikk Lunsj is based on Kit Kat, Japp is based on Mars, Smil is based on Rolo, and so on. I will, however, begrudgingly admit the quality of their chocolate is superior. The Freia shop has been on Karl Johans gate since 1899, but despite the pretty architecture, feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, as it doesn't offer any exclusive items or merchandise. If anyone from Freia is watching, here's some free marketing advice. Kvikk Lunsj merchandise. You're welcome. The Freia sign was originally a clock, hence the Norwegian name Freia Ure, the Freia clock. It was first erected in 1909 and, according to NRK, was Europe's first illuminated advertising sign. In 1910, Theodore Roosevelt was in town for the Nobel Peace Prize and is said to have been impressed with the scale of the sign, as it was visible from his room in the Royal Palace. Karl Johans gate is a 1,415-metre long street between the Royal Palace and Oslo Central Station. It's Oslo's primary shopping street and a popular route for political demonstrations and the 17th of May parade. It was named in 1852 in honour of the king, who died in 1844. Approximately halfway along Karl Johans gate is Egertorget, the highest point on the street, named after the Eger brothers who owned a local brewery. And that brings us to the end of the main tour. Continue along Karl Johans gate and you'll reach Oslo S, the start point. Side quests. Frognerparken, or Frogner Park, is not only Oslo's largest park at 450,000 square meters, it's also one of Norway's most visited attractions, receiving over 1 million visitors annually. Why? A section of the park, informally known as Vigelandsparken, is the world's largest sculpture park by a single artist. It's open all year round, free to enter, and contains over 200 sculptures by Gustav Vigeland, Norway's most famous sculptor. After the main entrance, which consists of 5 metal gates with intricate designs, there's a 100-meter-long bridge lined with 58 sculptures in all sorts of unusual poses. The most famous sculpture is the 83-centimeter-tall Sinnetagen, or the Angry Boy. My favourite sculpture is of a man fighting off 4 babies, which perfectly encapsulates the post-pandemic angst of fatherhood. Next is the fountain, which depicts 6 giants carrying a large bowl, surrounded by a multitude of sculptures. A jaw-dropping 27,000 litres of water flows through the fountain every minute. The centrepiece of the park is the monolith. True to its name, mono meaning one and lith meaning stone, the 17-metre-high sculpture is carved out of 1 block of stone and features 121 figures. The monolith stands upon a plateau, surrounded by 36 groups of sculptures portraying different stages of life. The last sculpture is called the Wheel of Life, which literally depicts 4 adults and 3 children forming a wheel. Just outside the park is Colosseum Kino, the world's largest THX cinema with a capacity of 871. Ticket prices start from 185 kroner. Holmenkollen is a ski jump hill that originally opened in 1892. The current record is held by a Finn who managed to clear 146 meters. For 195 kroner, you can visit the recently refurbished ski museum, which grants access to a spectacular viewpoint 64 meters above the ground below. If you're a thrill seeker here during the winter, you can try Korketrekken, or the corkscrew, a 2-kilometer long toboggan run. The track is free to use and sleds can be hired from the adjacent Akershus or Skiservice. The trip takes between 6 to 9 minutes and the start and end points are near metro stations, so you can ride back up to the start point and repeat ad infinitum. I mentioned before that if you only have time for one museum, visit the National Museum. However, if you're only visiting Oslo, the Norwegian Museum of Cultural History has a collection of buildings from all around Norway, so you can experience rural Norway without having to leave Oslo. If you're into boats, you're in luck. The Kon-Tiki Museum has Thor Heyerdahl's original raft that sailed from South America to Polynesia. The Fram Museum contains the Fram ship, designed by Scottish-Norwegian Colin Archer. It was used on Roald Amundson's successful expedition to the South Pole. The Viking Ship Museum is closed until 2027, but if you really want to see one, there's one at the museum in Tønsberg. One last point of interest is Tusenfryd, Norway's largest amusement park, which is just 20 minutes south of Oslo. Depending on your itinerary, you may want to look into the Oslo Pass, which gives you access to 30 attractions, discounts and public transport for 550 kroner. For tourists, Way Nord is a pricey but reputable place to get souvenirs. If you're new to the city, Outland is a chain that sells comic books, board games and pop culture merchandise. Festmagasinet Standard is a fancy dress shop for all you Halloween enthusiasts. And Neo Tokyo offers noodles, Japanese snacks, merchandise and cosplay items. You'll also want to become familiar with Oslo's ethnic stores. For produce, Grønland Torg Frukt og Grønt is cheaper than a typical Norwegian supermarket. For South Asian products, Nudvigata Dagligvare is a solid option. If you don't mind travelling, Deva-gruppen has more hard-to-find items. For East Asian products, Scanasia and a food market are your best ports of call. I'm not a fan of Norwegian shopping centres because they're all quite similar, but if you really want to visit one, you can take a short trip to Sandvika Storsenter, which is one of the largest in Norway with over 200 stores. I haven't eaten out too much in Oslo, but for Indian cuisine there's Punjab Tandoori in Grønland and Indian street food in Bjørvika. The former is an affordable place suited to non-Indian palates, while the latter is more authentic and has an impressive tasting menu which is sometimes on offer via the website Let's Deal. If you're into South Asian snacks and sweets, I recommend Medina Sweets in Grønland. They also do a cheap and tasty kebab wrap that will keep you going if you're feeling a bit peckish. For those with a sweet tooth, Fjær is an exquisite pastry shop with Instagram-friendly desserts, and if you find yourself near a VB Samson, do pop in and try the legendary cinnamon roll. If you're thinking of living in Oslo, here's an overview of how it stacks up against its neighbours. You can look forward to earning an annual wage of 790,800 kroner, coming in behind neighbouring Bærum and Asker. Oslo's house prices are incredibly high, costing 73,000 kroner per square metre, which is why living in one of Oslo's commuter towns is an attractive prospect. The level of higher education is outstanding, joint first with Bærum. Like other major cities, reported crime is substantially higher than Norway's average, but lower than London. In summary, if you're from a large city, comfortable in smaller housing and miss the chaos, Oslo is as good as it gets. Wages are amongst the highest in the country and the public transport network is well developed, so you're never far away from restaurants, nightlife or nature. The downsides, like other capital cities, are the cost of living and increased crime rate. Thank you for watching this video. Did I miss anything in this video? Or perhaps you feel your kommune is better? Let me know why and perhaps I'll pay it a visit in the near future. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, you can help me fund future projects and hopefully even make a living by becoming a member of the channel or donating to my Patreon. Channel members can look forward to early access to new videos, outtakes, a look behind the scenes, extended versions of videos and more. You can find out more by clicking the join button below. And if not, it's all good. You can help me out for free by clicking like, subscribing to the channel and clicking the notification bell. That lets YouTube know that you really enjoyed the video and in return helps boost my videos in the rankings. While you're here, don't forget to browse my channel for other videos about Norway's history and culture. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.